Good morning. The Transit and Bus Committee meeting is called to order. We can all find our seats. Do we have any public speakers, Mr. Marino?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We have 10 public speakers this morning. I would like to remind all the public speakers they have 2 minutes to speak. When I call your name, please come to the podium. The first speaker is Omar Vera. Mr. Vera will be followed by Jason Pinheiro.
Good morning, MTA Board's Transit and Bus Committee. Welcome back to another edition of your meeting. Now, today is very big for buses because when I went downstairs, when I came here, I saw a bunch of electric buses plus a double-decker bus. This is amazing. You were bringing London to New York. I love the double-decker buses, and I rode them when I rode them a lot when I traveled to London back in 2015. They're swell, amazing, and I feel like I know you're only planning one route so far on one express route that goes between Manhattan and Staten Island, but this should be the standard bus that should be spread everywhere in the bus system. New York should emulate London on the buses. They know what they're doing, and it's amazing. Thank you for bringing it here, and now on to the other issues. I noticed that you're trying to modify the M4 route in response to a demand from the DOT on widening 32nd Street between 6th and 7th Avenues, and I've said, well, first of all, I'm in opposition to what DOT is doing because why would you want to limit bus service? It's the M4 and the Q32 have always been there. It's near Penn Station, and people need to get to the bus quite easily. And but if you must reroute the M4, at least consider terminating it at 29th Street and 6th Avenue. So you can continue having it run on 5th Avenue all the way to around the 29th Street area, then you can terminate it at 6th Avenue, then turn back up. Because reasons I may explain later. But in any case, that's all I have here, and see you around.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. The next speaker is Jason Pinheiro. He will be followed by Tabitha Decker.
Good morning. It's good to be back. Good morning, Yolanda, and I see you again. I divide for rules. Want to thank you to bring the double-decker buses to New York. It is way overdue. We needed this bus turnaround plan because people who rely on buses, we don't need turtles in New York City. We need a more reliable service in our buses, and especially in Manhattan, where it's so congested, where I work, by the way, and take buses when I'm working. But we are forgetting that our subway tracks need attention. I have seen more litter on our subway tracks ever than before. It is a total disgrace. And I suggest that every board member goes stations in Manhattan and Brooklyn and the Bronx and Queens to see them for themselves what I'm talking about. And we're not going to be back in the old days where the subways, cars, and buses have graffiti. It is time to be in the 21st century. That's all I have to say for this month.
Thank you, Mr. Pinheiro. The next speaker is Tabitha Decker. Ms. Decker will be followed by Stephanie Veras.
Good morning. I'm Tabitha Decker from Transit Center, and I'm here with our partners from the Bus Turnaround Coalition. This morning, we're eagerly awaiting details on the New York City Transit bus plan, but we already know that riders will have reason to celebrate. From what we've read in the press this morning, we expect an ambitious and comprehensive plan, which is exactly what's needed to bring good bus service to the millions of New Yorkers who rely on buses daily. All-door boarding system-wide would be a major improvement for riders, saving them time, making buses more reliable, and making it easier for people to get onto crowded buses. Operators prefer all-door boarding too, because it frees them from managing the fare box and allows them to focus on driving. A plan to redesign routes system-wide would be very welcome news. Such a redesign would allow the agency to meet the needs of New Yorkers today, with more direct connections between outer boroughs and service frequencies that meet riders' needs. The proposed Staten Island redesign is a commendable first step on this, and we're happy to see that it appears to be on track with a public hearing proposed for next month. Progress starts with leadership and ambitious goals. We commend Presidents Byford and Irick and their teams for establishing a clear roadmap for turning around bus service in New York. We call on the board to give this plan your full support and to monitor the progress of buses by monitoring their actual performance and ridership moving forward. We look forward to being supportive partners on realizing this plan and to the quicker, more reliable bus service that millions of New Yorkers will experience as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. The next speaker is Stephanie Veras. Ms. Veras will be followed by Nick Cifuentes.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Stephanie Burgos Veras, and I'm a senior organizer with the Riders Alliance. And as an organizer, I'm always speaking to bus riders, and I'm always hearing about what is going on with their bus service. But not only do I hear about their stories, I also talk to them and tell them that they also have to share their voices and have to share their stories with people here in the MTA. And you've heard from these bus riders before, and you've heard of all the consequences that happens when bus service is unreliable. They've had long wait times, they've been stuck in traffic, and have been late to appointments, spend less time with their families. But you know, for many years, this has instilled a sense of feeling stranded and a lot of stress for bus riders. But today, it's a different story. Today, we are celebrating. Their voices have finally been heard, and riders all over the city and all the transit activist community is awaiting the MTA's bus plan. And this is a plan that will modernize our bus system, and it will change the way that we move around the city. And this is something that bus riders have been calling for years. And the MTA's plan is ambitious, and we all know it, that this will take our bus system to the 21st century. But most importantly, it will improve the lives of bus riders and give them more time to spend doing what they love and making bus service equitable for all New Yorkers. And here's a quote that I have in my desk that drives the work that I do every single day. Access to transportation is the single most important factor in an individual's ability to escape poverty. And this bus plan helps do that. It is a matter of equity, and it will provide riders all over the city access to reliable transportation. And so we want to thank President Andy Byford and Daryl Irick for your leadership. We look forward to working with your staff to make this plan into a reality, and we will work to make sure that the city will keep up with your ambitious timeline. So thank you very much, and thank you on behalf of the 2 million bus riders.
Thank you, Ms. Veras. The next speaker is Nick Cifuentes. Mr. Cifuentes will be followed by Jackie Cohen.
Good morning. My name is Nick Cifuentes. I'm the Executive Director of Tri-State Transportation Campaign. Tri-State is dedicated to improving transportation options in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And I'm here this morning to say that the MTA's bus plan is exactly what riders need. From technical fixes like all-door boarding and faster deployment of transit signal priority, to broader fixes like dispatching and stop spacing, and even to the system-wide bus network redesign, New York, the MTA's bus plan is exactly what riders need, and we're glad today to see that NYCT and MTA Bus Company have put together the kind of comprehensive vision that can really turn New York City's buses around. So we're glad to stand here today in support of the bus plan. And I want to say thank you to President Byford and President Irick for committing to a truly 21st century bus system for New York City. We're also glad to see the MTA committing to a fully zero emissions fleet, and we look forward to supporting that work as you move forward. We hope that the 2015 to 2019 capital plan is the last 5-year plan to include the purchase of non-electric buses. And we're glad the MTA's plan takes into account much of what the bus turnaround campaign, of which we are a part, has called for. After years of declining ridership on our buses, this plan is exactly what we need to reverse that decline and get New Yorkers back on the bus again. Over 2 million people rely on the bus every single day, and there are millions more who will see the buses as a viable and very attractive option as we make these improvements real. Now the challenge falls on elected officials at the city and state levels to support the bus plan, which is a real plan to fix New York City's transit for millions of New Yorkers. Many of them are in the outer boroughs, and many of them are in places the subway doesn't reach. Additionally, this plan will benefit seniors and people who can't access the subway. So we think it's incredibly important that elected officials support the work that you are doing here today. I want to close again by saying thank you to everybody here, and we look forward to help making this bus plan a reality and have better bus service for the millions of New Yorkers who rely on it every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cifuentes. The next speaker is Jackie Cohen. Ms. Cohen will be followed by Murray Bowden.
Hi, my name is Jackie Cohen, and I'm the campaign coordinator for the NYPIRG Strap Hangers campaign. And on behalf of myself, my colleague Jean Rushinoff, and the rest of the Strap Hangers campaign, we'd like to say hallelujah. The New York City Transit's bus action plan is one of the biggest wins for our city's 2.5 million daily bus riders in more than half a century. It would make bus service faster and more reliable, and significantly improve the lives of millions of riders who depend on bus service each day. And as this ambitious proposal moves forward, we look forward to seeing support from both City Hall and Albany to bring this smart and effective plan into reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. The next speaker is Murray Bowden. Mr. Bowen will be followed by Pedro Valdez Rivera.
You're dealing with a legacy mentality. This is a legacy report. This is the new report. That's the change. You're all involved. At the first meeting here, everybody was talking, how come we always did it this way? How come we haven't changed? I'm going to pick on you, Polly, because you represent the inability to change. And you may not like the fact that I have to talk about Department of Transportation, but I do. Major Deegan Expressway northbound at the Cross Bronx has had 3 lanes changed to 2 lanes, and it's been striped wrong for 20 years. I brought it up.
I don't own the Major Deegan, Murray.
I get to speak.
It's not a city road.
That's exactly the point. It's not a city road, and you're responsible for the United Transportation of the city. And if your department can't...
I'm not. I don't control state assets.
Excuse me.
I don't control
Excuse
this
me.
agency.
Mr. Bowden, I want to remind you about some rules of decorum we laid down a while ago.
Yep.
I hope you will continue and not direct your comments to any individual committee members. Can you manage to do that?
It may be very difficult.
Well, you know, there are some folks who...
What's going on in this country is that things have been the same for years and they never got changed. Yes, that road is the state road. And yes, the state is making the same mistake over and over again. Well, whose responsibility is to get it fixed? This is a united system. This system, the city, is supposed to work together. But it's not. She's permitted, Department of Transportation, the city of New York, is permitting the state of New York to use outdated lines. Is this city a city that is unified? Do we function as a unit? Or do we permit outdated requirements to control our lives?
Mr. Bowden, please summarize.
I am summarizing it. The issue of whether or not we function as a unit and we accept legacy stuff that doesn't work anymore. Andrew Saul said it this morning. Chuck said it this morning. How come we're putting out no-bid contracts that are not no-bid? They're not telling us the truth. At what point do you stop saying legacy is in and we're going to do it the way we always did it 20 years ago? Or are you going to begin to change? Twitter is in. Andy twittered. Now you're distributing information about Metro North on Twitter. That's a change. But you're still stuck with this, and you're still stuck with consultants that are giving you bad information. And when do you change?
Could you please wrap up, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
You can sit here and repeat what's in the manual, the information, and read statistics that we should have been reading online, and you think that is okay to use your time that way? I think that we need to be able to speak in a way that you listen, and people stop repeating what's in the book. read the book if you come before you come here. If you have questions, then ask the questions. But don't sit here and read the statistics that are already in the book.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The next speaker is Pedro Valdez Rivera. He will be followed by Gene Ryan.
Good morning. My name is Pedro Valdez Rivera Jr., a Rise and Rise member since 2013. I am a native New Yorker and I live in Brooklyn. The B38 helps connect me to the train, my family, and different places in Brooklyn. But exploring this city comes at a cost of time. Because often wait long periods of time for the bus just to be greeted with 3 buses back to back. Over the last few years, relying buses isn't an option. Many times I decide to walk or change my plans. And I know I'm not the only bus rider that can say these things. For years, bus rides were neglected. But today, this become a thing of the past. I and millions of other New Yorkers look forward to MTA's Bus Action Plan. We look forward to a citywide plan that will help bus service for New Yorkers no matter where they live. Features like all-door boarding, network redesign, transit center priority, more information at bus stops will take our bus system into the 21st century, but most importantly, it will improve the lives of many New Yorkers. Better buses will give me the opportunity to explore this city, attend more meetings at the Rise Alliance, and join other organizations fighting for change. Thank you to President Andy Byford and President Darrell Alec for listening to bus riders, transit advocates, and working on a plan that will make this city more equitable. And President Byford, I definitely look forward to seeing your presentation of the Bus Action Plan. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. The next speaker is Gene Ryan. Ms. Ryan will be followed by Bill Henderson.
Hi, I'm Jean Ryan. I'm from Disabled in Action, and I'm a bus rider, and I ride the express buses. And I was here last month reporting on my experiences and many other people's experiences with express buses. I see this 2-sheet plan, bus plan. There is not one mention of wheelchair users in there. Maybe there is in the larger document, but I didn't see anything there, and I looked carefully. This is a systemic problem that wheelchair users have of getting on the bus, and I'm going to keep coming here until it gets straightened out. I made 7 attempts to take the bus since our last meeting here. 6 times I got on. One of the times, the driver refused to let me on because he had a wheelchair user already on, but I told him the bus is not full until there are 2 wheelchair riders. I know what the policy is. And he said, well, I'm 10 minutes late, and you have to wait for the next bus. That is discrimination and prejudice in action. And we will not tolerate that. That's what used to go on so much before, and it shouldn't be going on even once now. The passengers get mad at us because it takes so long for the drivers to load us or unload us because they don't know what they're doing. And this last month, my 10-year-old grandson had to go into the bus and tell one of the drivers how to move the seats because there's a new system, and he didn't know how to do it, but my grandson did. Now, something's wrong with this picture. And one time, in this last month, the lift dropped while I was on it, going in and out. Stuff like that. This shouldn't be happening. So I want you to get your act together and make it just a routine thing that wheelchair users can ride the express buses with no problems. And I also really suggest that you consider a different model of express bus because it's so complicated for drivers to remember and use the lift. The passenger, me, I should not have to be training the drivers every time. But every time I get on the bus, I know what to do because I use it every time. The bus drivers don't. So what's wrong with this picture? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. The next speaker is William Henderson.
Good morning. I want to speak about the bus plan today. We're pleased with what we've seen so far and looking forward to learning more about the implementation of the plan. We hope that, that as you put the plan into force and others evaluate what is being done, we can all keep in mind three factors that we believe are critical for the plan's success. First, the plan has to deal with reality and not past conditions or what we wish would exist. Congestion is a fact of life. NYC Transit doesn't control the streets over which buses operate. Residential and activity patterns have changed and are not being well served by bus routes that have not changed appreciably as this development has occurred. Recognizing these realities and dealing with them is a critical first step. We think that the SI Express Bus plan takes a good step in that direction. We hope other redesigns do the same. Secondly, the plan must aggressively take advantage of changing technology, but not get ahead of it and not make changes just because they're possible. We are already beginning to see the advantages that can be gained by giving road control personnel real-time information about operations, but we can't get ahead of ourselves. For example, all-door boarding is appropriate in many situations, but without new fare payment technology in place, there's the potential for it to become a failed experiment that actually reduces public support for bus system redesign. It may not be the best path forward on all routes in any cases, particularly those with lower ridership. We look forward to the advantages that intelligent use of technology can provide for the buses. Third, the changes the bus plan brings to the system must treat all riders fairly. Riders who pay for their rides should not see people getting on without paying. Riders at the ends of routes should not be disadvantaged by short turns and having to wait out literally hours for a ride. We look forward to working with bus leadership on ensuring that fares are equitable and equitably collected, and that service is provided in accordance with riders' needs. The presentation of the bus plan is an important first step, and we're ready to do all we can to ensure its success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. That was the last speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Now for the minutes of our March meeting, may I have a motion to approve? Second. Any discussion or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes are accepted. Mr. Mulligan, are there any changes to the work plan?
No, there is not.
Then I'm very happy to ask President Andy Byford to take the microphone and share some good news with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. First up, thank you very much to those speakers who just talked about the bus plan. We very much appreciate the feedback that you've just given us. And I do see today as a big day for New York City Transit. With the launch of the bus plan, this is the first piece in the jigsaw, if you like, towards the full-scale modernization of New York City Transit, which we will cover in more detail at next month's board meeting when we release the full strategic plan, the top-to-bottom modernization of New York City Transit. If you recall, when I arrived here back in January the 16th, I talked about 4 equal priorities, and one of them was absolutely to arrest the decline of recent years in bus ridership and to get people back riding our bus network. For various reasons, people have not been riding the buses in greater numbers as they used to, and so it was very important that we understand the root causes of what is taking people off our bus networks, and to take action, positive action, to get them on the bus network once more. And so that's why this is deliberately a comprehensive plan. And I noted what one of the speakers said, where they called for an ambitious and comprehensive plan. I think this is that plan. We've deliberately looked end to end, from start to finish, on the various aspects of a customer's journey in order to create a plan that we think tackles all of the various issues that need to be tackled in order to reverse that decline of recent years. You'll notice also deliberately, and this is a forerunner for what's to come with the wider corporate plan next month, there are time-bound actions, time-bound tangible actions. We're not talking about we're going to study this or we're going to pilot that. Yes, sometimes things do get piloted, like the double-decker bus outside. Absolutely, we want to give that technology time to prove itself or not. But we are deliberately tying ourselves, committing ourselves, if this plan is adopted, to time-bound, tangible commitments, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, for which I and my management team will expect to be held accountable, and that you can expect to see in the wider corporate plan when that gets released next month. Now, this is, as I've said, a bold plan. Some of the actions contained within it are entirely within our gift, so it's incumbent upon my team and I to get on with them. You know, things that don't really need any outside assistance, you can expect and demand us to proceed with delivering them forthwith. But others do require the support of key partners such as Department of Transportation, New York Police Department, and legislators to give us what we need. And by legislators, I'm particularly obviously referring to the camera enforcement on bus routes. But this is, as I've said, it's a sign of things to come. What I should say is that this does build on the work of other people. We've had various inputs to the plan. We're mindful, obviously, of the City Controller's separate report. We're also mindful of the excellent work done by the Bus Turnaround Coalition. So we're not starting from scratch. We've deliberately taken reference and taken account of good work already done by others. And it has to be said, the excellent work in recent years by New York City Transit personnel and Polly and her team at Department of Transportation. We're not starting from zero. This is an evolution. But I'd also like to think it's a revolution, because we really are proposing the complete top-to-bottom transformation of our bus network, ultimately to give New Yorkers the transit system that they deserve, and more on that in the wider context next month. Before I throw to Darrell to take us through the presentation, just a couple of points. One of the speakers made reference to an apparent lack of accessibility items. With the greatest of respect, maybe it wasn't as explicit as it could be, but first up, I actually see all customers as equal, so we haven't made explicit reference in the customer service section. I'm talking about all customers. There shouldn't be a differentiation. But having said that, you'll notice that there are two specific items which do call out improvements for accessibility and mobility impaired customers, namely the installation of digital information screens, which we aim to make all ADA compliant, and then further down, working with DOT to ensure the accessibility of all bus stops. But I would again like to reiterate that point, that where there are references to other improvements, we're talking about for all customers, not able-bodied customers, all customers, and that's certainly the way that things should be progressed going forward. So I'll ask Darrell now to make the presentation. What I would like to do is say a huge thank you to Darrell and to Craig in particular, my SVP and VP for buses. It's easy for me to say, right, guys, I need a plan, and these are the broad outlines, these are the parameters of what I want, but you guys did the work, and I really appreciate that. So I think it's only right that you now should present the plan and show us the product of your effort over recent weeks.
Good morning, Board. So here we are with the anticipated bus plan, so I'm going to get started. So as you know, our bus system hasn't been immune to a national trend line on decline in ridership. But to address this, as President Byford has said, I'm sorry if you can hear me. President Byford, when he first got here, challenged me and my team to conduct a top-to-bottom review of the system and put together a bold, customer-centric plan to improve the quality of service. So our plan is anything but parochial. It reaches deep and far to challenge the status quo and calls for the kind of bold changes that will yield the most benefits for the greatest number of New Yorkers. We will need the help and support of all communities to make this work, and we're very excited about this plan. Next slide, please. So the next few slides will sort of set the context as to why we in fact need a bus plan. So as you're aware, our bus network not only complements the subway system, it provides a critical transportation service for millions of New Yorkers. Just to provide some context, New York City has the largest bus system in North America. In fact, we are 40% larger than LA Metro, the next biggest agency. We provide more than 2 million passenger trips every weekday, over 54,000 trips on 326 routes, using a fleet of 5,700 strong. Next slide. However, the network is significantly challenged. The New York City economy is vibrant, and traffic congestion is increasing. There are more cars, more ride-hailing companies, more delivery vehicles on the road. These issues and other changes in the transportation landscape have cut down on available real estate for buses. And we are seeing that impact on speed and reliability. We are currently the slowest among major bus systems in the world. In fact, our buses make it above 2 miles per hour only 50% of the time. The rest of the time, they are stopped at traffic lights, stuck in traffic, or loading passengers. The bottom line is that we have to find ways to move our system faster. So the time has come to look at this holistically, look at our entire network holistically. This is not to say that we haven't made improvements along the way. As you know, we make regular adjustments to improve service. We have rerouted buses to accommodate new traffic patterns, extended routes to serve new markets, and upgraded routes to select bus service. But the time has come to completely redesign the entire network based on customer feedback and the latest demographics and travel patterns. New Yorkers are choosing other modes of travel. Ride-hailing services have seen a large growth in trips. Over time, subway ridership has increased to record levels, in part by attracting some riders away from buses. Another factor is biking, which has become more and more popular with the launch of City Bike and as well as with the expansion of bike lanes. While we can't draw a direct correlation between these changes in declining bus ridership, it is clear that our system must adapt to the city's new transportation landscape. Bus ridership is roughly down 14% citywide. It is important to note that while the overall trend is down, there is a lot of variation between routes and neighborhoods, showing that buses do have the potential to be an attractive transportation option. These trends show that we're not meeting our customers' expectations. We must adapt to our customers' needs and the environment in which we operate. In response to this challenge, we have developed a bold, transformative vision to create a bus system that delivers for all New Yorkers. New York is a world-class city that deserves a world-class bus system. So now on to the plan. Here are the deliverables of the plan. Create a modern network. Expand bus priority. Require effective traffic enforcement. Speed up boarding. Improve the customer experience. Provide preemptive and proactive service management, and to continue to enhance our world-class fleet. So as you can see, the plan brings together many current, ongoing, and new initiatives. It builds upon the success of programs like SBS, the positive results of which are the clearest evidence that travel times have a strong correlation to ridership. And we will seek to apply those lessons across our network. The plan also reflects the plan also reflects input from all of our stakeholders, including our customers, board members, and transit advocates. So I'll go through each slide. First, we'll create a modern network. Most importantly, We will redesign the network using customer input, analyzing demographic changes, and looking at how travel demand and travel preferences have changed. The forerunner for this kind of effort is the Staten Island Express bus redesign that will go into effect later this summer. While the redesign process is ongoing, we plan to work towards optimizing the existing network. This includes a bus stop balancing initiative. In consultation with communities, we will remove closely spaced and underutilized bus stops throughout the system. We will also continue our bus forward collaboration with the Department of Transportation, which is making targeted improvements on some of our highest ridership corridors with the worst congestion and slowest speeds. We are also planning to pilot expanded off-peak service on strategic routes. We will improve service for those who work in jobs with non-traditional hours. Our next major work stream is expanding on bus priority. When buses are prioritized, more people move more quickly. One, we will work with the Department of Transportation to expand traffic signal priority, or TSP. Currently, we have TSP activated on 11 routes and 650 buses. By the year 2020, all of our buses will be able to support TSP, and we are working with DOT to significantly accelerate the activation of new priority routes. Secondly, we will also work with DOT to add more bus lanes and queue jumps. A queue jump is a special signal and short bus lane at an intersection which turns green for buses first. We've already successfully implemented queue jumps in several locations, including on the M60 and the BX12. In addition, we will explore the implementation of exclusive busways. Creating streets for the exclusive use of buses is an international best practice used in major cities around the world. The current busways on Fulton Street in Brooklyn and more recently on 161st Street east of Yankee Stadium are examples of where this has worked. Also, we are working to create a major new busway on Staten Island. The contract for the first phase environmental review of the North Shore BRT is expected to be awarded later this year. Bus lanes and bus stops clear and facilitate traffic flow through difficult intersections. We will also expand the use of bus lane enforcement cameras on our buses to enforce bus lane violations. Currently, the law only allows the use of bus lane enforcement camera on SBS routes. It is critical that we advocate for legislation to expand our ability to use this technology on all bus lanes citywide. We must speed up boarding. Buses spend on average 20% of their time loading and unloading passengers at stop. Changing the way riders get on and off the bus can speed up this process. We will install tap readers under the new fare payment program, making the payment process much faster. We will also introduce all-door boarding. Allowing riders to get on through all doors will speed up the boarding process as well. We will explore options for a future cashless system, as has been done at other major transit systems. Finally, we will expand our fare enforcement on regular bus service. Our bus operators and unions have expressed concern that the absence or limited fare enforcement on regular bus service puts them on the front line whenever enforcement issues arise. We also have several initiatives to improve the experience for our customers. We will continue to enhance the bus performance dashboard, which was released last month. The dashboard provides customer-focused indicators such as additional weight, travel time, and customer journey time performance. We are committed to regular dashboard updates and adding more functionality. We will also install digital information screens on all new buses and retrofit 1,000 buses this year. The screens provide customers with next bus information and real-time service alerts. One of the things we are really excited about is a new initiative to provide real-time seat availability information. The system will be able to, via web or mobile app on Staten Island Express buses this year. Express bus customers waiting at the stop will not only know how far away the bus is, they will also know if there's a seat available. Along with that, we recognize the need to do a better job communicating with our customers and intend to launch a comprehensive customer information campaign. We will also create new maps. Our system is big and complex, and right now we publish only a single map for each borough. So we're going to expand the options to meet different customer needs. This may include neighborhood maps, interactive maps, and maps showing only high-frequency routes. This is intended to make the bus system more appealing and easy to use. We will also continue to work with the Department of Transportation to install more bus shelters and expand the number of real-time next bus signs at bus stops. There are currently over 400 signs in service citywide, and we have heard from our customers and other stakeholders, and they want more. In addition, we are committed to accessibility. All of our buses are equipped with wheelchair lifts, and we will continue to emphasize training and awareness with all of our bus operators. Working with DOT, we will make sure that each of our 6,000 bus stops is accessible, making improvements wherever necessary. Our next big area is service management. And as a former bus operator, a former supervisor, road supervisor, this hits at home for me. This is where the rubber hits the road. We are reimagining how we perform service management to address the age-old phenomenon of bunching and gapping, with a view to improve the customer experience. Over the last few years, we have worked hard to put real-time information into the hands of our service managers and dispatchers. The core of this transformation is our homegrown service management tool, as we refer to it as BusTrek. BusTrek is available at satellite offices in each borough and provided to every on-street dispatcher across the city on over 500 mobile devices. Looking ahead, our state-of-the-art bus command center will be commissioned in 2019. It will be equipped with an industry-leading customer-aided dispatcher, a computer-aided dispatch system. In addition, all of our bus operators will have access to real-time pull-out, bus spacing, and schedule information. To take full advantage of these tools, we will reorganize our service management structure to improve coordination and effectiveness. And more importantly, the key to this process is engaging and empowering our staff. When you peel back all of the technology, ultimately our service is run by people. Only by supporting our staff with the knowledge and the tools to help them succeed can we deliver excellent service. Lastly, we will continue to enhance our world-class fleet. The MTA has always been a leader when it comes to environmental sustainability. We pioneered the use of hybrid diesel-electric buses dating back to the late 1990s and paved the way for the industry adoption of ultra-low sulfur diesel before it was even mandated. And today we have the largest hybrid and CNG fleet in North America with over 2,400 alternative propulsion vehicles. We will continue that legacy by transitioning to a fully zero-emission fleet. A test fleet of 10 all-electric buses began in service in January of this year. And as the industry matures, we are optimistic that we can make this transition. We will also evaluate new bus designs. For example, we will test the feasibility of operating double-decker buses in our environment. In fact, you will see a double-decker in service in Staten Island soon. In addition, we will continue to optimize bus reliability. A variety of new technology tools will help us identify problems before they impact service and establish the ideal timelines and cadence to replace parts and conduct maintenance. And finally, we will leverage technology to improve safety. Examples including installing pedestrian warning systems and additional safety cameras. So as you can see, this is a bold and ambitious plan. It will take hard work and dedication to make it a reality and bring it into fruition. We can't do it alone. We will need the continued input of our customers, this board, and the advocates, as well as a commitment to all of our partners, including the legislators, DOT, who's been a steadfast partner with us in all of our initiatives, and the New York City Police Department. But I assure you that myself and Andy and the entire MTA team are ready to get to work and are committed to making this vision a reality. I want to emphasize that this plan is also time-bound. Most of the initiatives are short to medium term, and we are confident that our customers will begin to see the results and outcomes of our hard work really soon. We will periodically report back to this board on our progress, and thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Darrell, just to top and tail that before we go to hopefully what will be a lot of questions. Again, I really do appreciate the work the team's put into this. This really is about tackling long-standing issues that have long dogged the bus network. But it's also about delivering on promises, Mr. Chairman. We said that we would put together this plan. We'd have it done to you by April. We have. We're now 3 days short of my 100 days here and working with this team. And we do intend going forward to be better at delivering on our promises. And by the same token, next month you'll see the full modernization plan for New York City Transit. So again, I'd like to thank my team. I'd like to thank everyone else who put this plan together in short order. We're itching to get on with it. We want to, we know it's the right thing to do, and we now really want to push on and make this plan a reality and get people back on the buses.
Thank you very much for this very positive step. I'm sure we have questions before we get to your own report. Mr. Albert, and then Ms. Vanterpool, and then Mr. Merdler.
Thank you very much for this plan. You know I've been harping on the cycle of death for buses, where buses, for whatever reason, can't get through, and so when people leave the buses for another option, and then when you count, there's fewer people on the bus, so the service is cut once again. So hopefully this plan goes a long way towards reversing that. It sounds like there's some elements in it that will help to reverse that. Getting back to the reasoning why certain routes are not doing well, I assume you will investigate why, if there has been construction, if there is frequent double parking or loading and unloading of trucks on a given route, as to why that route has seen a drop in ridership. Do you then perhaps revise the route, or do you do enforcement on that route? Which would come first?
So we're going to look at each of the 326 routes on a route by route. Every one of them will be evaluated by, where its origin and destination, its overall performance, its ridership. All of the factors of the service will be evaluated through this, I would say, top to bottom review of every route.
Oops, sorry. May I just add to that as well? So absolutely, but anyone sitting in the audience thinking, well, that's going to take time, that will take a long time to get through all 326, and it will. But in the same way that we're now looking at the subway for root cause, we want to get much better at dealing with root cause on the buses. So very rapidly, we want to get to pick off the low-hanging fruit on each of our bus routes. What is it? What are the worst causes of delay on each particular route? And who better to ask than customers, but also our operators? They're the ones out there every day driving the routes. They see what goes on. I think there's some pretty quick, what I call quick wins that we can deploy for known trouble spots. That doesn't quite often that doesn't require investment. It requires focus and management attention.
Am I correct in assuming that while this look at all 326 routes is progressing, the seasonal bus adjustments will continue?
They will, but increasingly we want to apply a customer filter, which is where Sarah comes in, so that we avoid that death spiral that you previously correctly described. And although we may still need to make some tweaks, and there's nothing wrong with that, we want to build going forward, not see that perpetual decline.
A couple of terms were referred to in the plan, and I just would like a little more clarity on them. The transit priority traffic teams, those are comprised of transit personnel or transit and NYPD personnel, or all three with DOT personnel, or what?
So the optimum solution here is to really engage NYPD. However, it's a very conceptual thing at this point, so it could be populated with NYPD, MTA personnel, you know. So we're looking at that. That's not fully baked, but what we do know, there is a need to focus in on traffic and traffic congestion and enforcement. So we're looking to partner with other stakeholders to get that done.
And if I might just add to that, Commissioner Trottenberg rightly makes the point regularly that the cops can't be everywhere. What it really needs is technology to assist us. So we do need that camera enforcement to both act as a deterrent to people don't even think about parking there, but also as a management tool. If you do, well, we're going to take action because of it, and you get more real-time information. But in addition to that, I do see much better deployment of our joint forces, including using the intel that we glean from bus operators, to which I just referred, in other words, known trouble spots. That's how you can then target finite resources to the most problematic, most impactful locations.
I have two more quick things. There was a reference made to doing away with closely spaced stops. Have you arrived at a threshold? What makes a closely spaced stop? Is it every 2 blocks? Is it every 3?
Sure. In the Staten Island study that we hear about in a minute or two, we're looking at really getting. It's been about every other stop. The stops in Staten Island Express are actually more closely spaced than local bus stops. So it will vary by the type of service and where in the city, what other resources are. But we'll look at ridership by stop. What we found in Staten Island was there was a disproportionate usage of the stops we're retaining compared to the stops we're getting rid of. So,
and you'll look at the kind of neighborhood the stops are in, whether it's a predominantly senior population who might not be able to walk as far.
Absolutely.
And the last thing I want is that you made a reference to new maps that will be issued, including neighborhood maps which may only show high-frequency routes. If you don't show all the bus routes on a neighborhood map, isn't it likely that folks won't know that the other routes are there and maybe not try to ride them?
Yeah, my statement there wasn't exhaustive or prescriptive. I think conceptually we know we need to do a better job. The system is very big, very complex. So, you know, interactive maps. I think neighborhood maps can be useful, but that wouldn't be the only map. So,
no, I think neighborhood maps are fine, but you should show all the routes on a neighborhood map, I would think.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you.
And again, sorry to keep jumping in, but this lady to my right, the Chief Customer Officer, will be the person, our conscience, if you like, to make sure that we think about the customer in designing the maps, but also to your very valid previous point about demographics. We're not going to be advocating or proposing the removal of a stop where the demographics suggest it would have an inordinately disproportionate impact upon vulnerable local residents.
Thank you.
Ms. Vanterpool, then Mr. Merdler.
Thank you. First, Andy, thank you for your directive that provided license to the team to be bold and innovative, or go beyond what they've done over the years, and again, just give them the license to do that. Secondly, to the bus team and crew, thank you for so doggedly working with the advocates, at least over my 11 years of advocacy on this issue. Thirdly, a big shout out to the individual groups in the advocacy community who for 11 years have been talking about these very same improvements, particularly all-door boarding. That was a big shift for the agency, and I want to shout that out and acknowledge that your acceptance of that is transformational. And then not just the individual advocates, but then the most recent collective of the Bus Turnaround Coalition, with which you've all met pretty concertedly with. So I want to acknowledge that. I want to point out the impact of congestion on buses. So we see in the reports that bus riders are spending almost an additional 2 minutes waiting for their buses. Then when they're on the bus, they're waiting almost an additional minute, or having an additional minute of travel time added to the duration of their route. And then we're also seeing the hit on our buses, particularly the Bronx fleet, with MDBF declining so rapidly. In fact, local and limited buses are declining 11%. And I'm sure that congestion has a significant impact. So with regards to congestion, so much more has to be done. You all have pointed out some strategies here. First and foremost, New York City has to address congestion in a concerted way. NYPD has to really step up enforcement. It's been talked about repeatedly. There is no excuse to have some of the most egregious violations be from the own fleet of NYPD vehicles. So that needs to be resolved. Secondly, we need more bus lanes in the city. It's something that you all have recognized to do in partnership with New York City DOT. Commissioner Trottenberg has acknowledged this. I want to point out that that is not an easy task, particularly the B82. SBS is not going to move forward this summer. And, you know, this is a call to bus riders. You need to work more directly with the advocacy community. If you are one of those 28,000 bus riders on that B82 corridor, you are letting 6 elected officials and some very loud drivers mess up your commute. And you have to be more concerted about your needs here. It is very difficult to implement bus lanes in New York City because the needs of bus riders are consistently drowned out by a small minority. And I think there has been a good deal of outreach over at least many years to better engage with the community and address a lot of those concerns. We need, moving forward, the mayor and the MTA to be better proponents of congestion pricing. Had we had that involvement and that support during this budget season, perhaps we may have had a different congestion pricing proposal than what was proposed. What has been put forth will generate revenue for the system. It is a welcome target on some of the underlying causes of congestion, but it is an incomplete proposal. And much like the MTA was very supportive of the value capture proposal, I would expect, if congestion is such a root cause of problems impacting our fleet, that the MTA is at the very forefront of congestion pricing, along with the mayor, in its entirety as a proposal moving forward. And then lastly, bus camera enforcement. We really do need that. It is absurd that we are solely expecting our police department to deploy its very valuable resources to monitor bus lanes when we have this technology. And not only should we have this technology expanded, this is not legislation that should sunset or expire every 5 years. For all the varying modes and mechanisms of traffic camera enforcement that we have, it is a waste of time for those people who are in support of this legislation to go to Albany and advocate for this every few years. This should be made permanent, and we need the MTA and the mayor and other entities to continually deliver that message, not just in this legislative session, but in the next one. So in closing, thank you all for your support.
Mr. Merdler, then Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I think what you have just seen is an illustration of the wise use of experience and ability. Darrell was a bus driver and a supervisor. Andy Byford has run many a transit system, and you see the beginning of change. I'd like to make 6 what I think are positive suggestions. For the past 5 or 6 years, I have in vain made the following suggestion. If you want community input, there are community boards. We ignore them. Only in the recent past have those who have responsibility for this area within the bus division decided to give the community boards a week or 2 notice of a change in the bus schedule. It is important that those schedules be carefully vetted and the routes be vetted with the community boards that are selected by the members of the City Council and the borough presidents. They are the frontline representatives of the communities, and while I much appreciate the activities of advocates, these are not advocates for the sake of advocacy. They are representatives of the community. So that in fashioning your proposals as to new routes and as to new schedules, look to the community boards for input. Don't demean them, as has been the case by some in the past. Number two, one of the major problems that confronts every bus driver are the mosquitoes called Uber, Goober, yellow cab, green cab, purple cab, and what have you, who flit in and out at a moment's notice, stop at any red light, and of the first 6 cars, you'll see at least half of them, or at least in Manhattan, livery cabs of one form or another. It's time to put a limit on this. It's time to say enough. And I don't mean just on the Ubers, I mean on the yellows and the greens. Number 3. Throughout the city of New York, on a gradual scale, the city of New York is engaged in a conscious program of constraining traffic. Whether it turns 6 lanes into 2 or 5 lanes into 1, that constraint impacts. Why? Because the cars move into the bus lane. They are right to do so because they are being forced by government to do so. It is time that a very well thought out and a very well-intentioned plan be re-examined, because those constraints constrain the buses as well. Number 4, throughout the city of New York, especially in the island of Manhattan, there are triple parking and double parking of buses. DOT has made a major step in the direction of addressing that with the curb program that was recently initiated. But here is another aspect of the problem. If a Fresh Direct, UPS, or like truck double parks, triple parks, the law enforcement officers, the police traffic enforcement officers, first thing they do is look at the last ticket that was on the window. If it is under 3 hours, it's a pass. And in some areas, they particularly permit this kind of thing under current legislation of the City Council. That has to be changed. The City Council has a responsibility. It can't shove it all to DOT. It has a responsibility to address the legislation that makes possible double and triple parking. Number 5. The Police Department of the City of New York has, as Commissioner Vitiello will tell you, previously had a policy under which it will not enforce parking in bus stops. It shuns that responsibility. Commissioner Vitiello, to his credit, investigated that. If they won't do it, then I suggest constructively that either the traffic enforcement officers do it or that we do it through the MTA police force. It has to be done. A camera will capture a picture. A ticket will capture attention. Next. The traffic enforcement officers in this city are many, and they are very active, whether they have a quota or not. But the traffic enforcement officers have a responsibility as well, which I don't think they discharge, which is to enforce the requirements that permit buses to move. They need to wake up. And lastly, and this is a tired old suggestion of mine, which Joe Loder may remember from way, way back. There are parts in New York City where the roads are narrow and where the number of people who board a bus are few. It is time for the hopper bus, the small bus that can go in and out of Pelham Bay Park area, pick up the half a dozen or 20 people who need bus transportation and take them to the subway. I understand the problem is the multiplicity of vehicles requires a multiplicity of mechanics and inventory and the like. And I understand that that has been a restraint. I would ask you to look at it again because, as Andy Byford will tell you, London Transport has found it exceptionally successful, and so have other cities, and I thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, then Commissioner Trottenberg.
Okay. President Irick, there was a speaker who mentioned, actually picked up on it, the training of bus operators to handle the lifts that help the disabled get in. What is the current process? What is the current process? How much training is the bus operator given?
So we feel that the current process gives all of our bus operators ample training on all of our fleets. However, there are routes that I think one of the speakers pointed out where they don't get a lot of traffic in terms of using the wheelchair. So maybe refresher training is appropriate in that. So what we've done since the last committee, we've mandated that our divisions take a new look at that, particularly in our training center, with all new bus operators and bus operators being recertified to get refresher training and out in the field. So the current process is that there's no bus operator that doesn't get ample training on any of our fleets, but we do see there's an opportunity to do more refresher training.
Okay. And just one other question. Obviously, the first rollout of this is going to be the L train shutdown and the reliance on buses. What is this going to be the first test of the new systems, or how are you doing it?
Well, I think certainly some of it. There's what I would say close to a potential busway on the streets. So many elements will be incorporated in that, but that's not the only place. Again, in my presentation, a lot of what we're going to do is short and midterm. So some may be before certain technology elements that will improve the customer experience. Some will be implemented by end of this year. So they have a myriad of different delivery dates.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just add, David, Commissioner Jones, I'd like to stress the point I made earlier about quick wins. We think there are things that can and should be done right now. Same approach and philosophy that we're now deploying on the subway. So as much as possible, tangible improvements by the end of this year. But absolutely, the L line shutdown will need and adopt a lot of the points made in this presentation and plan.
Commissioner Trottenberg, then Mr. Reckler.
Okay. Well, Daryl and Andy and the whole team, thank you. I think this is a great plan, and we had a lot of good consultation on it. I think from the city's point of view, particularly excited to work together with you on some of the things that call on DOT and NYPD. And just for the record, some of us have been up in Albany every year advocating for cameras, so we're not Johnny-come-latelys to this topic. It's proved a tough sell with our colleagues up there, but obviously I'm going to be back up in Albany in a couple weeks. Happy to once again bring that topic up. Very excited, particularly about redesigning the network. Obviously, seeing what you all have done in Staten Island, think it's a great start. All-door boarding, tap readers. Don't know about cashless, but it sounds promising. So, congratulations. And I think from our point of view, we'll just be interested to see how this is sequenced. What comes first? Some of these items are easy to do, some may be less easy to do. So, but really looking forward to working with you all. And thank you so much.
And thank you. You and your team have been fantastic on this, and we wouldn't be where we are rather, without DOT's full cooperation. So again, thank you.
Mr. Reckler, then Mr. Vitiello.
Thank you. Andy, I'd like to compliment you and Daryl for putting forward such a great, bold plan. I think this is probably the biggest changes we are going to see in New York since Ralph Cramden was the favorite bus driver of our city. I specifically appreciate that you didn't turn to a 20th century playbook to solve 21st century problems and trying to grab a hold of new technologies. I'm a big supporter of bus cameras. I think to the extent that we can even expand that beyond just the cameras, using that to see what's in the bus lane, but for those that are blocking the box and other enforcement areas will help the NYPD, and I think that's critical. Following up on Veronica's comments on congestion pricing, fully agree. This is a great step towards that because, as we talked about in the past, we really can't implement congestion pricing if we're going to force people out of their cars if we don't have a bus system that functions effectively, and this will also hopefully relieve some of the pressure that we're feeling in our subway system. So it's another step in the right direction in that front as well. And I think the other thing I think is important here is to continue to lean into your operators, your customers, your community to give you the insights as to how this ultimately plays itself out. And lastly, I just would like to, again, compliment you for working with the city the way you have in such a collaborative fashion, because obviously this can't be solved, and probably appreciate your leadership on this as well without working hand in hand with New York City DOT. And I encourage you to continue to do so as we go forward in a collegial manner as you have to date. And just as a final comment, I know you're going to be presenting next month your broader presentation of the transit system. I'd again encourage you to take the same sense of bold approach to this, thinking with the 21st century mindset. I know there was some press this morning regarding the signal system and some question as to whether or not that was a risk to be taken. I'd encourage you to take those types of risks. We as a community can't wait half a century to have signal systems to be put in place that makes our subway system function effectively. So I encourage you to, if we have to take some risks here, let's be thoughtful about it. Let's test them, but I think we have to think outside the box if we're going to be successful. So thank you both, and thank you for your teams for your efforts here.
Mr. Vidiello.
Darrell, Craig, Andy, team, I also want to echo Commissioner Reckler's comments. I think this is a great plan and is really impressive. One thing that I do have concerns about is, as Commissioner Reckler indicated, an effective bus system is really a prelude to congestion pricing. And the camera enforcement, assuming we get it, there's a pretty long lead time to sort of getting it passed, conceiving how it will work practically, running the RFP to procure it, getting it implemented. I mean, there's a lot of runway in front of that. And it would seem to me that effective enforcement of the bus lanes in the interim is really pivotal to all the other things that follow on that we're trying to do. And to Commissioner Merdler's comments, what I heard wasn't so much that the NYPD wouldn't enforce it. It was more a question of resourcing and prioritization. And I want to suggest that if we haven't already had meetings with Chief Chan, that we maybe organize that, and maybe, Chief, you can help us facilitate that if we haven't. But that's pivotal, and it is certainly true today that you see a lot of cars, trucks double parked in the bus lanes, and you feel it when you're on the bus, the impact of that immediately, the bottleneck it creates. But I also want to echo the suggestion that Commissioner Merdler made, and I've wondered about it for a long time. I don't think there's anything that would prevent us from assigning a number of our own police units from enforcing and riding in the bus lane. I believe that legally they have the right to write that ticket. I'm not sure where the revenue goes when we write that ticket, so I'm not sure that it pays the immediate dividend sort of that it funds itself. At the same time, I have to believe that on an interim basis, if the NYPD and ourselves were okay, it sort of worked out an agreement where that's all right, if that's even necessary. People seeing that there's real enforcement going on in those bus lanes would be hugely impactful, because right now they have almost a complete disregard. They're not worried about it right now, and it seems hugely problematic to me. But so, I don't know, Chief, if you can help us facilitate those meetings with Chan, but that would be useful.
Yes, I will. Not only Chief Chan, but Chief Harris and the Chief Patrol.
Great, thank you.
Believe it or not, President Byford has a report to make to the committee.
Thank you. Pardon? Oh, yes, Staten Island. We do have one other bus item. Thank you, Darrell, for reminding.
Yes, so just as a forerunner to much of the work that we focused on in the bus plan is the Staten Island redesign of the express network, and we have Jonathan Hawkins here to give you a quick update and presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. And you'll hear a lot of the same themes you just heard in this as well. I also emphasize this is a very short presentation on a very complex topic, redesign a whole system, so I would encourage everybody to go to the website that's on the screen. You can also get to it from the main MTA website, and we have all the maps available there for you to look at. Also in your package today, you'll see that we have a request to host a public hearing on this next month. So this project it was part of the Staten Island bus study. It really stemmed from a lot of complaints from customers about very long travel times, unreliability, crowding, etc. And we've worked very closely with the Borough President James Otto's office on this. And as Daryl talked about, congestion in the city has been increasing for years, particularly in Manhattan and in the heart of Manhattan where these routes go. And, you know, to a certain extent, we have to deal with that. But there's also many things we do control directly, and that's really what this was looking at, is what can we do in our power. And one of the most stark things I think that came up was what you see on the screen, that the average express bus route from Staten Island makes 27 stops before it even leaves Staten Island. So for those who are getting on those routes early on, it's a very long ride, and it's hard to look at that and say that makes sense. And a lot of these routes are circuitous. They haven't been taken a look at in a long time. Over the course of this project, we did a tremendous amount, I think, of public outreach. We surveyed over 3,000 riders on the buses and at stops. We've held a number of workshops and open houses that were attended by over 700 people. We had a bus hackathon here with about 150 people. We've gone to the community boards multiple times on this. And so we've really heard from a lot of people, and then our job was to figure out how we took what we heard and made it into something that would improve the service. And one of the most important things is that many or most of these issues can be traced back to Manhattan. And you can sort of see on the map here that in the peak hours, at least, the overwhelming majority of our riders are going to downtown or midtown. But around half of them are on routes that basically come out here at the Battery and go all the way to Central Park and encounter who knows what along the way. I mean, anything can happen, and it's very slow travel speeds. The subway is usually moving 4 to 5 times faster, often below the same street. So we're using a lot of resources traveling on top of subway lines and local bus routes rather than moving people between Staten Island and Manhattan. And so a big part of the focus of this project is on the Manhattan end. So in our proposal, as I mentioned, the Manhattan end is really what looks the most different. Rather than having these routes that take a tour of Manhattan, we're focusing on key areas. So we're dividing the network so that routes go to one specific area. And originally we had concentrated this into fewer corridors. As we continued our public outreach, we expanded to more areas in a way that we don't think compromises the overall plan. And we added, I think, West Street service to Greenwich Village. Originally there was sort of a gap there. We added service on 6th Avenue. I'll also note that in Midtown, going southbound, we're looking for every route to use 5th Avenue. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that many riders actually have multiple routes they can take, but they're broken out into different streets. So you sort of have to, bus time has helped with this, but in some ways you have to pick in advance which street you're going to go to. So they'll be able to just get whatever bus comes first that goes where they're going. The other element is that we've worked very closely with the city DOT on this. They are soon to be installing a painted double bus lane on 5th Avenue. They want to make it a high priority bus corridor, and where those corridors exist, we want to put buses on them. So we want to put buses where they will move the best and where they'll have the best chance to fight through the traffic. So as I said, obviously, you can't really digest these maps looking at these screens, so I would encourage you to go to the website. But just looking at the existing network here, and then I'll flip back and forth a couple times to the new. One thing that sort of looks obvious immediately is that on Staten Island, the change is not as dramatic in that the streets that have express bus service today will, for the most part, continue to have express bus service. Most of the Staten Island changes are on the South Shore. If you look in the bottom left corner of the map, you see the existing, a lot of sort of tangled routes, some of them going sort of the wrong direction from where they should be, and just making that into more logical direct corridors so that people don't have to go on what we often hear of as a tour of Staten Island. So on the Staten Island end, one thing I'll quickly note is that we have renumbered all of the routes, and that is because, given the extent of the changes, we really need to emphasize that there's a new route to learn, new number to learn, pay attention, and it was hard to translate, given the extent of the changes, the old route numbers, and just keep them the same. So we've changed that. On the island, maybe the most dramatic change will be the bus stop spacing, which Darrell alluded to. And as I mentioned, 27 stops before getting off the island. And every bus stop is not just about the time sitting at the stop for riders to board. It's about pulling out of traffic, pulling back into traffic, getting out of the flow of signal timing. Many streets are timed so that if you move at the speed limit, you're actually getting green lights. So every time a bus pulls out of that flow, they're more likely to encounter a red light. So we're proposing increasing the average bus stop spacing from around a quarter mile to around 0.4 miles. And around 70% of riders would actually continue to use the exact same stop that they use today. And for almost all of the remaining would have a stop less than a 5-minute walk from their current stop. Now, obviously, no one wants to have to go further to a stop. It's a very challenging part of this. But once people are on the bus, for those who did have to walk a little further, they will be moving much faster and more reliably, and hopefully it will help reduce some of that bunching, which leads to people having to stand, which no one wants to do on these long trips. So I'll also mention, since we published this originally last May, we've made a considerable amount of changes. We've surveyed riders, we've gone to the community boards, we've held 6 open houses, and we've made some minor changes on Staten Island to better accommodate existing riders. A lot of changes in Manhattan, as I mentioned, and we've also added some experimental park and ride service that we're going to be trying from South Beach and the Staten Island Mall, where there will be trips that go directly into Manhattan without making any further stops. So the last thing I'll mention is the off-peak service. Today we run 3 routes off-peak, express bus routes from Staten Island. Under this, we're going to get that up to 4, so we're going to have off-peak and weekend service to more of the island, including in the South Shore and up on the North Shore, the very popular Watch Oak Road, Victory Boulevard corridor, and that'll be a big benefit to a lot of people. So we're currently targeting this for an August implementation. We'll be having a public hearing, and then we will hoping to be back here in June for a vote on this. And we think it's going to be a project that will benefit a lot of riders and make the network a lot more logical and a lot faster and more reliable. And if there's any questions, we'll be happy to take those.
Thank you for your very comprehensive presentation. President Byford, you have a report.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the interest of time, I'll keep it reasonably brief. My commentary will be largely as tabled, so you can read that at your leisure. I mean, the points I'd like to highlight include that of safety. We have, as you know, suffered 2 tragedies of late, and we are being careful to make sure we get the full root causes found in the investigations, which are still ongoing. They're joint investigations with our unions, so we will report back on that in due course, but both of those investigations continue. On a more positive note, I would like to do a shout out to a couple of our employees. Every day out there, 50,000 people are delivering excellent service, and a lot of what goes on gets unreported. And there were 2 people in particular, a conductor, Kevin Barch, and an EMT, Christian Wynn, who's recently saved a person's life on the F train in Queens. And this is the kind of thing that goes on out there. We have so many quality people, members of staff, who really are passionate about what they do, and I would like to do a big shout out to them. Yesterday was Earth Day. You'll have seen the electric buses downstairs. We talked about the double-decker earlier. We've got 2 electric buses buses downstairs. One is a Protea bus, the other one is a New Flyer, and they are currently in service, and these are buses that we're trialling to test the technology, and it's great to see the industry really is now taking such matters seriously. There's quite the momentum afoot with electric buses in pretty much all of the major manufacturers. The only other thing I was wanting to do was quickly talk about service reliability, subway reliability. So I've just got a few slides on this, Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me. You recall that, so I'll just go back one just by way of introduction, that back again in that first meeting that I attended, we immediately got stuck into a debate around subway reliability, and in particular, root cause analysis and delay attribution. Delay attribution being certainly my term for how we assign delay incidents to a particular root cause or pot. So that was clear to me from day one. That was something that we needed to do better at. There's been a lot of talk about it. There's been talk in the media. I think there's been some general misunderstandings about the subject. So it's very important that you understand that A, we're taking this seriously, and B, what we're doing about it. But what I would say is quality of data has improved in recent years. So, yep, we are capturing more delays. But my philosophy is until you truly understand the root causes of delay, you can't apply corrective actions with confidence. And that was a point that I made back in January. So there were it seems to me there's three principal challenges. We needed to create a single source of data. We were using two, and I will come on to that in a second. So that was job one, consolidate the systems into one, just one source of data. Two, once you've got that single source of data so you know what's coming in, make sure that you are attributing the delay incidents to the right category. And number three, cut the number of incidents in the first place, because then it's a problem that disappears. And one of the problems that we have is there's so much data to be analysed that it is somewhat overwhelming. But the key has got to be to reduce the overall numbers of delays. So three quick slides in a second to say where we've got to with each of those three challenges, but a bit of context. We run about 8,000 subway trips each weekday, and typically we get around 250 to 300 incidents disrupting service daily. Now, some of these are very short, some of them are of longer duration, but each one has the potential to impact multiple trains. One of the reasons for that is because this is a very complex subway in that we interline. It's not like the tube where most of the lines are self-contained, so yes, you'll have disruption on that line, and you will get disruption spread between lines, which is the only downside of what is actually, I think, a massive upside, and I'd rather have this than the tube design, in that most lines you've got so many alternate routes and get out of jail cards, so you can divert around a problem. But that does mean that it's very difficult to confine disruption to a particular line. So how do we define a delay? Those are the three definitions there. It's pretty tight, and it does include things like if you skip stations en route, which maybe is the right thing to do, because that helps you get back on track, helps you get round problems, helps you speed the service up. We're not going to cheat, though, and say that train hasn't been delayed, and this stops what would I call it, perverse behavior, whereby if your only target was punctuality, then you would be mass skipping stations. So to stop that, we count that as a delay. But what I would also say is that a point that I regularly make: most people, most days, don't get delayed. Remember, we carry 5.7 million people a day on the subway. So the three challenges. First challenge for me was to set to have one single database. On that slide, you can see the history of how we have traditionally recorded delays and incidents. It's typically done initially was via the what's called SIRS. You can see there the Subway Incident Reporting System, and that was a pre-2007 system to report on-time performance to the board, and we've still got the legacy indicators with which you're familiar. That had its merits, but what that didn't do was give us as much information as was needed. It didn't capture all of the delayed trains. For that reason, a second database was created, or a second system was created, which was the terminal delay database, so that we more accurately captured the overall quantum, the full number of delays. Now, that in itself is not easy, or certainly wasn't not so long back, because we didn't have the technology to support that. Originally, it was supported by people literally with paper and pencil. We've now made that system electronic, and the B division was the last to be completed, 2015, and that has been used now for 10 years to report delay information to you. But the trouble is you're still dealing with two databases. So in addition to the daily challenge of capturing all this stuff, we had two sources of data. We wanted to consolidate them into two. We have just done that. So that's tick. First challenge now has been consolidated into one database, and I would like to do a big shout out to the team for doing that. That is going to materially help us in our capture of the delay incidents in the first place. So if you're capturing them, you then need to attribute them. And this is where the second challenge comes in, delay cause attribution. And it's particularly important that we understand what the root cause of delays are, because if you don't understand that root cause, how can you then tackle those delays? And let me give you an example. You can see there on the screen the actions we're taking. But let me give you an example of with the new database, how we can get better granular detail. There was one day that we analysed in particular on the A division, where pretty much all of the trains on the A division at a point in time left the terminal at least a minute late. And roughly a quarter of those trains had experienced a non-crowding incident, so nothing to do with crowding, on the previous trip by the same train, implying that there was some residual delay in the system. Another quarter or so of the crowding incident trains were behind a non-crowding incident train at some point in their trip. It sounds a little complex, but what I'm saying is, once upon a time, not so long ago, they would have been put down to crowding. They now aren't, because we have a better understanding of what was the root causing. Crowding, in this instance, was not the root cause. So you will progressively see that somewhat contentious pot, which I took objection to in my first board meeting, you will see that pot progressively come down, because let's get to the root cause here. It's not crowding. Crowding is invariably the result, not the root cause. So then the third element, once you've got the single source of data capture and you're better assigning the actual incidents to the correct cause, is to reduce the number of delays in the first place. And I'd like to just do a little shout out to one of my colleagues at the back there. Take a bow, Kyle, one of my colleagues back there, Kyle Kirschling. I've tasked Kyle, I've set up a little task force. Kyle and one of his colleagues, Alexandria, have got a commitment from me, or got a mandate from me rather. I want to see very rapid, quick wins in order for us to reduce the overall quantum of incidents. We believe that there are things that can be done to actually reduce the quantum in the first place. And you can see some of them relate to subway action plan measures, but then there are also additional strategies which we flagged back in January, not news to us, been reported on in the newspapers, but weren't news to us, including looking at what the impact of signal modifications have been, looking at how effectively or not we manage the service and where we intervene, looking at schedules and seeing if they align with operating conditions, looking at operator practice, the way the operators drive the trains. So you will see progressively going forward, not only do we reduce the number of delays as we make the service more reliable, but you will get much more granular detail. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, in the book today, you will notice that whole page, the infamous page, whatever it is, chart 20, is under review, because that's exactly what it is. Thank you. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Then we're off to hear from Mr. Jazicki on the subway portion of the customer service report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subway's full written report can be found in your board materials on page 22. You'll notice that March was a challenging month for subways due to several reasons, including 4 winter storms. There were a total of 84 major incidents in March, including 27 related to the weather. If we exclude these 27, there would have been 57 major incidents in March, certainly more in line with the improved performance we've seen since the implementation of the Subway Action Plan. Comparing the period before and after subway action plan, major track incidents have decreased by 11%, major signal incidents decreased by 19%, and major car incidents have decreased by 21%. The full funding for the subway action plan will allow subways to accelerate our efforts to minimize incidents further, reduce delays, and certainly improve the passenger environment. On another note, the subway car mean distance between failure increased to 127,910 miles in February 2018. That's an increase of 1.9% compared to February of 2017. The fleet performance overall was 7% stronger than the 12-month trend. Elevator availability was 96.5% in March, a 1.2% improvement from March of 2017, and we attribute those improvements to the better performance of the Washington Heights elevators, as well as our efforts to redeploy staff and in progress in filling vacancies with our maintenance forces. And one last note, in March and April, we experienced serious service disruptions across multiple subway lines as a result of malfunctions of the solid-state interlocking at Bergen Street in Brooklyn. That's on the F&G lines. We're working on a multitude of fronts to improve the reliability of that interlocking, including restoring an uninterrupted power supply system, analyzing system error logs with the vendor to identify other cause factors and potential upgrades to the system and components. We continue to stage personnel on site 24/7 to quickly respond to any problems we may have, and we appreciate our customers' patience as we identify and address those root causes. That concludes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merdler, then Mr. Albert.
Mr. Byford, if you have a train leaving from its initiating point to its terminus, you have a timetable. It's supposed to be there within 40 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever. When the train comes in late, is there somebody there, or is there some form or some computer program that records why it was late? It seems to me that is a piece of information that would fit into your database on a contemporaneous, timely basis and tell you from the person who was late why he was late. Do we do that now?
Yes, is that right?
So the answer is yes, there is a system, and during Mr. Byford's presentation, it was referred to as TDD, Terminal Delay Database. The problem that we encounter is the crew themselves may not know exactly what caused the delay. So when they arrive late to the terminal, they can report that they are late, they experienced delays somewhere along the route, but they don't always know what the root cause of that delay was.
And the reason for that is theirs may not be the villain train. It may not have been their train that was the root cause of the problem. It may have been something ahead of them, which was the point I was making about complexity.
I accept that, but my question really is, there is a piece of information, because your word was correct, they don't always know, but sometimes they do. It seems to me a useful purpose would be served in capturing that information in as best a form as you can.
Absolutely, which is why one of the three actions that we honed in on was to create a single source of data analysis, which we've now done, because we were trying to cross-reference, and we have been historically, between two. So we now have a single database to do what you're rightly suggesting.
Mr. Albert, then Ms. Venterpool.
Frank, looking at the statistics this month, the R32 and R42 fleet are their usual poor performers, so I'm wondering, how are we doing with the R179s?
So to date, we have 4 trains of the R179s in passenger service. We're looking to have the 5th train in service sometime around the end of this month. And regular deliveries have started from the plant in Plattsburgh.
And how are they performing?
They are performing pretty well to date. We did have some challenges in the recent past that we were able to overcome. But to date, everything's been going well.
And the delivery schedule is a train a month or every other month? Or?
Don't quote me on the specifics. It's about 8 cars per month, and then until the plant starts ramping up to a higher production rate.
Thank you.
Andy, before we hit the 1-year mark of the Subway Action Plan implementation, are you and or the team preparing some sort of reporting for the board? I'm having difficulty truly understanding what progress is being made. So just reflecting on some of the metrics in this month's committee books. Service delivered is down. On the weekend is down 5 percentage points. Additional platform time is up. On-time performance is down. Trains delayed, both weekday and weekend, is up. Major incidents has increased on the weekend. The passenger survey environment has decreased. So this is, sort of month-to-month reporting, as you well know. So it's difficult for me to really understand the improvements of the subway action plan. So it's more open-ended question.
I think that's a very fair challenge, and I accept that challenge. I will provide a report to this board, which will summarise at the 1 year mark. So it will be around June. Well, since the state of emergency might be a good time to do it. What the results have been, but a couple of immediate observations. One, service delivery down doesn't surprise me because we're doing so much work. So we're not able to operate as much of the schedule as we would. This is short-term pain for long-term gain. We are installing continuously welded rail. We are clearing out drains. We're getting rid of garbage. We're fixing leaks. So much work is going on in a compressed time period that will have a short-term detrimental effect, but absolutely will have a long-term beneficial effect. One thing that's also going to help us immensely is when we get our vacuum trains, of which there will be 3. The first is on its way. It was crated up the other day, loaded onto a train to go to the port to be shipped across the Atlantic. I cannot wait to get that thing deployed. So I'll happily take that action, Mr. Chairman. We'll list that as an action for me to report back on.
Okay. I think we're ready for the bus part of the service report. Mr. Irick.
Thank you. I'll be short. My full written report can be found on page 50. In reviewing our performance in March, the snowstorm on March 7th had the most significant adverse impact on our metrics for the month and is the primary cause for the decline in performance versus the prior month. However, the 12-month rolling average for MDBF through March posted a modest gain of just under 0.5%. I just want to remind you that we do have 3 buses downstairs. We would like for you to take a look at them. 2 electric buses by 2 different vendors, and also the Alexander Dennis double-decker bus. Also, want to remind you that this Thursday, April 26th, buses and paratransit will be doing a live Twitter chat, so we would like for you to send your questions. We look forward to hearing from you. Also on paratransit, the full report can be found on page 74. As part of our continued focus on our customers, we launched an e-hail pilot at the end of last year. The pilot, and specifically the introduction of real-time on-demand service for paratransit customers, has received very, very positive feedback from customers and resulted in increased demand. In addition, we are booking close to 5,000 advanced reservation trips each and every day. For these reasons, Steve Plachaki has put forward actions this month to add an additional vendor in the pilot and increase funding for the existing vendor, Verifone, through the end of the term. These actions will enable us to evaluate multiple contractors engaged in the pilot and continue to improve service for our customers. And that completes the report.
Mr. Poole, then Mr. Glucksman.
Thank you. Even though the chairs of the respective board task forces reported last month, I just want to take the chair prerogative right now to briefly just highlight some very significant improvements in paratransit. Pickup time has improved 2% over last month. No-shows have improved on the dedicated carriers 15%, and then on the brokers 26%, and that is attributable to increased oversight. There's been a 1% improvement in a passenger's scheduled time, and while that may seem negligible, for those customers who make up that 1%, that makes a difference. Transportation-related complaints have improved 70% over last month, and the call speed improvement, or call speed, has improved 31%. So I want to just point this out because every month we have customers who come to these meetings who relay their concerns and their issues to us, and I wanted to point out that improvement is being made. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no one else, Mr. Glucksman, I'm sorry.
We talked about buses, so on page 193 about the M4, are we going to talk about this later, or can I just ask the one question now? Okay, then I'll wait.
If that concludes your report, I'll ask Mr. Bromfield to present the safety report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the safety report is on page 89. And of note, you have two reports this month, and that is an abbreviated report and the regular report. The abbreviated report is there because we've been able to advance our reporting on certain statistics, and so we wanted to make sure we didn't lose 1 month in the process. Going on to performance, employee lost time accidents, bus collision, and collision injuries continue to decline. Subway fires are up on both on a 12-month basis for both February and March. The majority of the fires occurred along the right-of-way. It should be noted that since the implementation of the Subway Action Plan, right-of-way fires are down. Subway customer accidents increased in both reporting periods, driven by slips, trips, and fall incidents. And we did an analysis, and they appear mostly to have increased around station turnstiles and mezzanine areas. Finally, we're happy to report that our aggressive actions on installing friction plates has led us to increase our goal from 37,000 to 50,000. That completes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Merdler.
Just one quick footnote. That analysis very interestingly showed not only that the accidents are occurring around turnstiles, thereby raising the question why, but two, that the weather doesn't seem to have an impact on it in terms of platforms or stairs, which I don't understand how that's happening, but that is apparently what the statistics show.
One of the things that comes up a lot of times, and I know I do it in my home, when there's bad weather out there, I change my pattern of behavior. I took a slip out in front of my place once, and now whenever there's black ice, I walk really slow and like a duck. So you see a change in behavior to address poor weather.
Thank you, Mr. Bromfield. Words to live by. Now I'll ask Chief Delatorre to present the crime report.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to report a continued year-to-date decline in subway crime, with total major felonies down 11.5% as of the end of March. There were 71 fewer total major felonies than during the same period last year. There were 22 additional robberies, 121 versus 99, that occurred during the same period last year. Grand larcenies were down 17.8%, with 75 fewer incidents, and felony assaults were down 14%, with 13 fewer incidents. Year-to-date, the robbery average is 8.6%. 8.6 per week, which is roughly the same average we had during the period last year, and our second lowest year for robberies on record. During March, 36% of the total major felonies were committed in Manhattan, 36% were in Brooklyn, 17% were in the Bronx, and 11% were in Queens. Now, I'd like to commend the work of the New York City Transit Security Team for their role in an investigation that led to the arrest of 3 Spanish nationals responsible for a series of significant incidents of vandalism in our subways. While patrolling, the security team captured critical information after the 3 men tagged a train that was stored overnight and fled. Working with the New York City Transit Team, members of my own Special Projects Unit discovered the 3 men had recently arrived in the U.S. from Spain, where they were known international graffiti vandals. Our team tracked the 3 men to a location in Brooklyn, where they were again observed vandalizing a train. They were arrested and subsequently charged with felony criminal mischief and other crimes. Further investigation tied them to at least 9 additional incidents in the Bronx, Queens, and Manhattan as well. Their passports have been confiscated. They were arraigned on these charges and they are awaiting subsequent court appearances and further charges. The investigation is still ongoing. Finally, I'd like to note how pleased we are that the neighborhood policing has arrived in our subways. I'll be keeping you up to date on our approach and how the officers are patrolling the subways and assigned to specific areas of responsibility. Riders will see the same officers in the same stations, and they can now directly contact the neighborhood coordination officers dedicated to the stations or station they frequent with their concerns. The reality is that we do have a community in the subway system. The same people generally get on the same station every day and get off at the same station every day. So we wanted to really tie ourselves to those communities of commuters. And I also want to thank especially President Byford for his support. This is a shared responsibility, and the MTA and the Transit have really been very good partners with us on establishing this new rollout and this pilot. We began less than 2 weeks ago with Transit District 12 in the Bronx and District 30 in Brooklyn, and look forward to expanding to all our transit districts and the entire subway system by early next year. I'm excited about an approach that adds elements of accountability, customer service, and increased uniform presence in the subways, and I'll be sharing more with you in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you, and I welcome any questions or suggestions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Merdler?
Chief, if I may, would you attribute to either increased police presence or to just a more lawful society the fact that we have less arrests, less summonses, and the like for the first quarter of this year?
What would I attribute the crime reduction to?
Yes. Well, I'm not talking about the crime reduction.
Yes.
I'm talking about the number of summonses that were issued and the number of arrests, both of which are dramatically down.
Yes, they are. Well, there is a balance here, and I can't say for sure what it is. This is a science we have not yet nailed down yet. But when we have less arrests, we do have more officers on the platform and on our trains. We've also made some other adjustments within the system. I've increased our night patrol dramatically, and anti-terrorism unit within the actual transit bureau. So there's a bunch of different variables, and it's a day-to-day, week-to-week analysis of where the officers should be. And at the same time, we track very closely our recidivist offenders, so that ebbs and flows as well. So as people come out of jail and we start to see them on the system again, and we know them to be recidivist offenders, we also start to pick up on them very quickly. And we've been very successful this year in noticing them on the system, following them, and then capturing them the first time they commit that crime. So that also has helped us a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing else, thank you so much, Chief.
Yep.
I'm going to ask John O'Grady to present the capital program report.
Good afternoon. The capital program report is on page 154 of the materials. 20 projects were awarded during February 2018, totaling $2.1 billion. By far the largest of those awards was the purchase of 535 R211 B Division rail cars, valued at $1.7 billion. Substantial completions during the month totaled $71.6 million. This included various track and switch replacement projects on multiple lines and the installation of coastal storm mechanical closure devices in the vent bays at stations in Lower Manhattan that are in the flood zone. Actually, the photo of one of those devices is shown on page 154 of the materials. That concludes the capital program report.
If there are no questions, I'll ask Mr. Lieber to present the MTACC projects report.
Mr. Chair, I have 2 projects to report on. The Cortlandt Street Station continues to make headway towards the planned opening in the fall, with substantial completion by year end. In a significant milestone, the station has been energized by Con Ed, and otherwise we're moving forward, although risks are not completely eliminated. From my standpoint, the most significant action recently was that Andy Byford and I co-chaired a very significant meeting to plan the turnover and opening of the station, which has historically been one of the pitfalls of these kinds of projects. And I think that we kicked it off very effectively, and the teamwork is going to be there to accomplish it, the systems testing, the code compliance reviews, and ultimately the startup and handover of that facility. So thank you to Transit in advance for their cooperation. Second Avenue Subway, we achieved a milestone when we submitted for Phase 2 of Second Avenue. That is the environmental assessment has been submitted to FTA in compliance with the schedule that we're operating on for the federal grants process. And we have, in keeping with that, initiated the public outreach. We are doing sessions before the two relevant community boards in East Harlem and Central Harlem. One of those took place last week. It went extremely well. I think everyone was excited, and we heard from a lot of folks how anxious they are for that project to unfold. So moving in the right direction on 2nd Avenue Phase 2 as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lieber. If there are no questions, I have one.
Yes,
are you satisfied with the progress of the contractor on Cortlandt?
I would say that I am satisfied that we are making very good headway. 100% satisfied, I'm not. But this is a project that is moving forward as a normal, challenging project, as opposed to where it was before this board took action and conveyed its views to the contractor some months ago.
Mr. Albert.
Jano, there was numerous reports in the news that it looks like October is the approximate opening of Cortlandt Street. Is that a fair assessment?
That is where what we're shooting for, yes, sir.
Thanks.
To present a procurement package.
Good afternoon. The procurement package, which presents New York City transit procurements, includes 8 actions totaling $28.7 million in expenditures. I'd like to highlight 2 actions in this month's agenda. Both items to be highlighted are for the Department of Buses Paratransit Division and are part of a 12-month pilot program to test and evaluate the use of e-hail companies and their web applications and their ability to disseminate paratransit trips to New York City TLC licensed drivers. The e-hail pilot program began in October 2017 with Verifone Transportation Systems and has been operating successfully and has received positive feedback from our AAR customers as well as paratransit advocates. The first action I'd like to highlight is the award of a new contract, an estimated quantities contract in the amount of approximately $2.5 million to Arrow Inc. It's a New York-based company to test and evaluate their e-hail web-based app for the remainder of the pilot program. Arrow operates an application that disseminates trips to approximately 7,800 yellow and green metered taxi cabs affiliated with them in the 5 boroughs. Arrow is expected to perform approximately 69,000 AAR trips under this pilot. The addition of Arrow to the existing pilot program will provide even greater capacity and allow for paratransit to analyze the capabilities of multiple e-hail companies simultaneously. The second action is the approval of a budget adjustment in the amount of approximately $19.3 million to provide additional funds for continued paratransit e-hail services being provided by Verifone Transportation Systems. They are involved in the current e-hail pilot program. Verifone was the first of multiple e-hail companies intended to be awarded contracts under this pilot. Verifone operates an application that disseminates trips to approximately 13,500 yellow and green metered taxi cabs affiliated with their application that are located in the 5 boroughs. At the beginning of the pilot program, we anticipated that Verifone would provide somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,500 rides a day. As a result of their performance, we've gotten them up to about 5,000 trips a day, hence why we need the additional money. In addition, I want to point out that we've declared an immediate operating need to expedite the award of the Arrow contract, as well as to insert additional funds into the Verifone contract, as well as to facilitate the addition of additional e-hail providers once we close negotiations. These actions are being processed as an immediate operating need, and therefore they do not require OSC review and approval. Hence, we'll make the awards immediately. I request your approval of all items in the agenda.
Second. Any discussion on these procurements? Let me congratulate you on moving as expeditiously as you have on these very important areas. They've been a long time in coming, but if they deliver on the promise of improved paratransit access and service, it will be time and money well spent. There's nothing else. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry. Now, for service changes, Mr. Capiero.
Thank you. So this month there are 3 staff summaries for information in your package beginning on page 187. One staff summary outlines routine minor adjustments to service on 21 bus routes to be implemented in July. The second one was the one that Jonathan Hawkins mentioned before in his presentation. We obtained the chairman's approval to conduct a public hearing on the Staten Island bus service express bus changes. That will be next month in May, and we'll be back in June, hopefully with a plan that we can present to you for approval. Lastly, on page 194, we describe a route change on the southern end of the M4 in Manhattan that will be effective in July. We worked very closely with New York City DOT on the uses of that block so that we could continue to provide some bus service to serve the 3,000 customers that use the M4 and the Q32 to reach Penn Station. It was a balance of those needs and of the real need for pedestrian improvements on that block. So our proposal is to retain the Q32, working again with DOT to preserve space for the terminal and layover of that bus and relocate the M4 to further north.
Of course there are. Mr. Merdler and then Mr. Albert.
May I be assured that the community boards have been fully consulted on this before implementation?
Yes, we met with all the community boards on both the M4 and Q32, which go to vastly different parts of the city, presented several options to them and got a lot of feedback, which resulted in us revising the proposal several times and again working with the city to retain the Q32.
I read the supporting material and the need for Q32 riders to get to the Penn Station area. Having said that, in order to make it as least painful as possible for existing M4 riders, or those of them that did want to get to Penn Station, is 41st Street as the turnaround selected because there's available curb space or because of another reason? Did you look for a place further south than that to turn?
Well, we several things. First of all, with most of the riders that will have shifted to the Q32 that are going to Penn. They serve a common area.
Shifted to the Q32 right. Via a transfer, you mean?
Most of the riders on the M4 that were going to Penn were boarding in areas also served by the Q32. Okay. So that was one factor. The second was, in fact, yes, we did have available layover space at 41st Street.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Glucksman.
This is a historic route. It's been over 100 years it's been running that way, but I understand that things have to change. One question I have is will there be a provision for people who are on the M4 riding from uptown to get an additional free transfer to the M32 at whatever stop you decide that it should be done at?
Yes, they would get a transfer to the Q32, but as I indicated, most of the riders boarding the M4 to this zone were coming from where the Q32 currently stops. Along 5th and Madison, there are multiple routes that continue south of 41st Street to 34th Street where the M34 is available. And from the unique part of the M4 up in in Western Harlem, there are routes that come straight down to Penn as well. So there are multiple options that M4 riders have.
Thank you.
Mr. Albert.
Peter, one last thing. Did you look at the possibility of continuing to operate the M4 and letting people off and on 32nd, just not having a layover there, and perhaps storing it on 32nd between 5th and Madison or anything like that?
We looked at a number of options, and on 32nd there just wasn't the space even for an additional stop. We do need, and as we go through these neighborhood studies and the bus plan in general, it's critical that we have adequate space to provide layover and terminal locations so that we can provide reliable service, and that continues to be challenging in a dense area like Midtown Manhattan. So we work closely with DOT to try to identify those locations.
Okay. I'll ask President Byford to not merely make his standard follow-up reports, but also comment on any outstanding committee action items.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. You'll see within the pack that we have a regular status report on MetroCard activities, and then there's also the MTA Homeless Outreach Report. And again, consistent with the work plan calendar, the final year-end 2017 operating results for NYCTA, SIR, and MTA Bus, all of which can be seen in the committee book. So maybe just pause there, see if there's any questions. Seeing none. In that case, then I'll just conclude with the outstanding committee action items, something that we feel is best practice. So we're continuing, as I mentioned earlier, to refine our process for categorizing right-of-way delays. More on that to follow. You'll see, as I said earlier, that the chart is shown as under review. So that, I think, is a work in progress. It's not one that I will close today. We will be providing all committee members with recommendations relating to Transit Adjudication Bureau violations. We have a few pending questions about the cost to bring the subway system to a state of good repair and the cost to make all station repairs. Well, that's all being wrapped up in the corporate plan, which will be launched next month, which is the, as I've said before, the modernization document for the whole of transit, not just subway, but all other aspects of what we do. We are developing contractor compliance programs for the contracts that you highlighted. We're working with NYPD to consider periodic reporting on bus lane violations. And then finally, we'll add another action to the outstanding actions list, which is the one that came up earlier. But upon reflection, Commissioner Vanderpool makes more sense to report back on in September, given that there's no report in August. We will report back on the subway action plan with the benefit of 12 months data, which seems to me to make sense in September. I mean, the alternative is July, but then we'd only have 11 months data. So my proposal is that we make it a comprehensive report with 12 months to play with as soon as you reconvene after the summer break. Thank you.
I'm confident I speak for the rest of the committee, President Byford, when I congratulate you on the clarity and thoroughness of these reports. If there is nothing else, a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor. We are adjourned. Thank you.